Hi, my name is Dr. Marci Littlefield, and I want to talk to you about the development of sociology. Sociology developed in the middle of the 19th century, and it was really the result of three really important factors. A lot of the things that were happening in Europe, which included the Industrial Revolution, the political revolution in the United States and France, the development of imperialism, which really is part of just the context of understanding what happened when early Europeans went to other nations and began to see other cultures that they had never seen before, and the success of the natural sciences. All those things included and really influenced the development of sociology. At the same time, the Age of Enlightenment was a really important part of understanding what happened in society. And this term, the Enlightenment period, is part of what you would learn in philosophy, but is part of, I think, what makes sociology great, because it includes all the context in which the history and the way in which society changed influences how we see society. But the Enlightenment period and what was happening in the Enlightenment period really contributed to a different way of looking at life, looking at man, and looking at the importance of science and how science began to now influence the way early thinkers thought about themselves and the society in which they live in. The social change that really contributed to, again, the development of sociology had to do with, one, the American War of Independence, the French Revolution, which was between 1789 and 1999, the Industrial Revolution, which first began in Great Britain, and then the Cotton Gin, which completely revolutionized the United States and also created this context for thinking about the ways in which society was changing overall. So part of these changes, when society was changing and developing, these changes now contributed to a new society, a society that did not exist before. The Industrial Revolution, for instance, created the steam engine, factories were developed, mass production was part of the whole context of the way society looked, and society no longer looked the way that it looked before. And this whole social upheaval that, again, grew out of the Industrial Revolution gave rise to the whole scientific method. And that was a way of really trying to understand, now that all these social changes that have happened, now people are living in different contexts. They're no longer living on farms. They've now industrialized. They've moved to cities. If we talk about France, in France, the people overthrew the government because they were completely disenchanted with the monarch and the way in which society was structured. What that meant is that there were a lot of social changes happening all at the same time. And all these social changes needed to be understood. And this is where Auguste Comte comes in. Auguste Comte is considered to be the father of sociology because he wanted to understand the social order. He wanted to understand what holds society together. How is society possible? All those are really important questions as we think about sociology and the context of how it developed. And Auguste Comte is considered the father of sociology because as he started trying to understand what society looked like, part of what he constructed and what he came up with was a scientific method. And what he wanted to say, and just like you understand the social world, he felt like you could also understand society. You could understand all the changes that were happening in society, and he felt like you could understand through the scientific method a way of understanding those changes to make society better. And he was considered one of the early thinkers in sociology. And all of these thinkers, Auguste Comte, again, was the father of sociology. Other sociologists also came along to try to understand some of those changes. Auguste Comte said, let's systematically study behavior. Let's systematically study what's happening in society. Harriet Martineau, who is now recognized as also being an early sociologist, she studied social behavior in Britain and the United States, and she looked at the impact of the economy, law, trade, health, population. Herbert Spencer also looked at he looked at evolutionary change, and he's responsible for social Darwinism. And in this context of social Darwinism, again, what we see with all of these sociologists is that they are really trying to understand the social world. They're trying to understand all the changes that have happened, and they're trying to really make sense of the changes that were happening in society. Durkheim comes along, and Durkheim is a really important theorist because he says that behavior has to be understood within the larger social context. Durkheim is really important because while Auguste Comte suggested that we should understand science, we should understand society in a scientific way, Durkheim comes along and he says that not only does he say we should understand it in a scientific way, he comes up with a way of also constructing a study to really understand society. And he comes up with this famous suicide study. In Durkheim's suicide study, he says that in order to understand society, we have to understand this larger social context, which is also part of just thinking about the whole sociological imagination. You know, we talked about in the earlier video, the sociological imagination, how important it is to understand how you are part of your social environment. Well, Durkheim, back in the 1800s, when he constructed this whole context of understanding society, he wanted to study suicide. And as he studied suicide, he wanted to understand why is it that why do people commit suicide during certain time periods? During certain time periods of social upheaval, he concluded that is what contributed to suicide, that people were more likely to commit suicide during times of social unrest and less likely to commit suicide when things are going well. And so part of what Durkheim concluded was that behavior has to be understood within a larger social context, because what happens when people don't feel connected to society, they experience anomie. Anomie is a concept which says that you experience a loss of direction felt in a society when social control of the individual becomes ineffective. What does that mean? That means that you're no longer part of society. You don't feel connected. And because you don't feel connected, that contributes to higher rates of suicide than when you feel connected. People who feel connected are less likely to commit suicide. So part of Durkheim's famous suicide study was a way of understanding society and understanding a lot of the social changes that were happening in society. So again, how do we understand society? We understand society as being the context of a lot of the changes that were taking place, and all these changes that were taking place ended up developing what we know and what Auguste Comte helped us to understand, to know as sociology. Thank you.